Hello, everyone. I'm Lorencino Estrada.
And I am Reno Del Toro.
And this is Fully Charged, bringing you the NFL's top storylines, fantasy news, and advice, as well as game predictions for the NFL's most exciting games this season or next season on the Fan Weekly. Reno, we're doing something pretty ambitious. We got together this weekend and we compiled a list of the 100 best players in the National Football League, according to us. Now, there's pretty sure it's not correct, but this is something that we have put together, and we're going to do it by tens. So we're going to start at 100. We're going to start from the top, and this episode we're going to do 100 to 91. Reno, we see the show. We like the show. Sometimes we don't agree with the show, so we decided I will do it. We came together on this. We have agreed on these picks. We've agreed on these picks, except for one or two, and we've made this list.
Yeah. I mean, we'll see. The viewers will hear what kind of picks. Were very questionable. We always want comments. We always want feedback. Your opinions always matter. But tonight starts it off 100 to 91 of the top 100 players of the NFL. Lorencino, I can't wait.
Yeah, and this show comes in a little late in the off season, but we'll go ahead and start it early, and let's get right into it. Yeah, Reno?
Yeah.
Yeah. So at 100, from the Washington Redskins, running back Adrian Peterson. I mean, this guy had a phenomenal year, and it really back from the previous season when he was with Arizona, not so much, right? He didn't have this great year. He comes to Washington. A lot of questions with the running back room in Washington. Darius Geis went down with that ACL injury. It was who's going to be this running back? And they get Adrian Peterson, and he gets 1,000 yards on the season.
Yeah, you talked about that. I mean, we came into this season with Geis being the focal point, but when he went down, they had to switch directions. So they brought in Adrian Peterson. Of course, they already had Chris Thompson in the backfield, but Chris Thompson was also coming back from an injury as well. And you talked about it. He went over 1,000 yards a season. Don't forget, he also had 7 touchdowns. This guy was a powerhouse all this season. For the Redskins. I mean, you talked about last year. People probably forget about this, but he was actually picked up by New Orleans to start the season, and they released him because of Alvin Kamara and his breakouts. And then he went to Arizona, where he only totaled for 448 yards. And Washington needed a lot of help this offseason, and they got it with Adrian Peterson. The Washington Redskins were strong on the ground last season because of Adrian Peterson. I don't know. He's getting older, Lorencino. That's always something that comes up by Adrian Peterson. How his age will decline his production. And for a guy that was 33 years old, I mean, it's crazy. He's going to turn 34 in the next couple of weeks, but he looked phenomenal last season. That's why he cracks this 100 list. You cannot have a top 100 list with the guy who's one of the best running backs in NFL history in Adrian Peterson.
Yeah, and what he did for the Redskins this season, he's touched on it a little, but if Adrian Peterson's not on that football team, they're not even in contention for the playoffs. They were late in the season contending for that NFC East still. It was very jumbled up, and they still had a shot at it. And if you ask me, if Alex Smith doesn't go down with that injury, well, the Redskins are probably winning the NFC East, and the playoffs all of a sudden become a little bit more shaky. I think the Redskins would have made the playoffs if Alex Smith was still the quarterback of that team. But really, it wasn't that. It was because Alex Smith. Now, yes, he was managing the football, and obviously you put in a guy like Mark Sanchez and then Josh Johnson and those guys. Obviously, Alex Smith fares better than them.
Right.
But Adrian Peterson was really the focal point of that offense, and NFL defenses every week when they lined up against the Redskins, they knew that he was going to be the one that they had to stop if they wanted to win that game. And at his age, still demanding that attention, that's impressive.
Right. And to point this out even more, Adrian Peterson had some explosive plays to go into the end zone. We talked about how back in the day he just broke out tackles. This year he did the same thing. We felt like we saw the Adrian Peterson of old playing this season. He was so good this year. I remember I believe it was a 60-plus yard touchdown run that he had where he just broke away. And a lot of people,
Giants.
Yeah, and a lot of people wanted to pick him up in fantasy football, and they did because of what he did. And that's a good pickup if anybody took him because over 1,000 yards equals production. He had 7 touchdowns. He also had a lot of receiving yards, and people are thinking, don't you think that was Chris Thomas's idea? But Chris Thompson was not. He wasn't playing because he was hurt again. He got hurt again. So more carries for Adrian Peterson, more receptions for Adrian Peterson, and all around he was just a better back this year than most guys, in the NFL.
Yeah, and he had 169 fantasy points according to Pro Football Reference. So he was there, and he was making an impact on those games. And Reno, let's go ahead and move on to number 99. Do you want to go ahead and announce that one?
Yeah, it's the big boy in Tennessee, Jurrell Casey. Now, I know you're not a big Titans fan, but whenever you think about the Titans and you think about that defense, Jurrell Casey's the guy that pops up. The defensive lineman has been a juggernaut for the Titans, and this year he was it again. 62 tackles. He had 7 sacks this season. When you talk about this defense, Jurrell Casey has to be the guy that you talk about. And now going forward, it's not a Brian Arakpo's team anymore, and Brian Arakpo retired. It's Jurrell Casey's defense, and he is the leader. He's the leader. He can get the job done. He matched last season with 2017 season. He had 2 more tackles, and he had only 1 more sack. So he matched last season, but last year he was a dominant player again, and this year, he led that Titans to that last-minute push to make that playoffs, and even though they came up short, Jurrell Casey, yet again, was a vocal point of that defense, and people have to take it to wonder, Jurrell Casey can get to the quarterback as quick as anybody can, even though, he's a heavy guy, he can still get to the quarterback. And people just don't know about this, but he's 29 years old. For a defensive end, he's probably still got another, 3 or 4 years before that the progression goes away. And when you have a guy like him who can be just a dominant end, I mean, come on. People have to start double teaming him on the offensive line because if he gets through, not only is he pretty strong, but he has some good speed as well, and that's what makes Jurrell Casey a dangerous player on defensive end.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a Jaguars fan, as this podcast knows. But whenever I see the Jaguars play the Titans, first of all, Jacksonville can't get over this hump against the Tennessee Titans. They own us. I mean, that's just being completely honest. They have our number. The Jacksonville Jaguars are owned by the Tennessee Titans. Not Shad Khan. It's the Tennessee Titans, and a reason for that is because of Jurrell Casey. Jacksonville can't get anything going on the offensive side of the football. They take care of business on the defensive side when they play the Titans, but it's on offense where they just can't get anything going. And for the past 2 seasons, Jacksonville hasn't beat Tennessee in the past 2 seasons, and Jacksonville has been a run-first team in those past 2 years. And when you got a guy like Leonard Fournette back there, I mean, you know what's coming for any NFL defense, but yet Tennessee always lives up to that, and it's because when Leonard Fournette is running that football, Jurrell Casey's there, and he's taking up double teams left and right. And still he has that same production. He's been a Pro Bowler 4 years in a row now, and he's very underrated, maybe because of the fact that he is in a small market franchise like the Tennessee Titans, but his impact for that defense, for Dick LeBeau's defense, it's always there, and they pride themselves on defense. Tennessee does, I mean, their offense is very, in a sense, this past season they were a little bit like Jacksonville. They ran the football real tough with Derrick Henry, and they played some pretty good defense. And when you have an anchor on the defensive line like Jurrell Casey, well, then that's bound to happen. So 98, you may not agree with this one, but at the same time, you're also not a big Baltimore Raven fan, and that's Tony Jefferson, the strong safety for the Baltimore Ravens. Now, the stats aren't there, The stats aren't there, but this was a guy who was all over the field this past season, and he made that Ravens defense very feared throughout the NFL. This was a top 10 unit in 2018, and they made the playoffs for a reason. I mean, obviously the success of Lamar Jackson, but the way that they got to the quarterback and the way that they played good defense all around on all 3 levels on defense. I mean, Tony Jefferson, he has to be up there. And he played phenomenal this past season. He was all over the field. Didn't catch many Ravens games, but when I did, and when I watched these Tony Jefferson highlights, the guy is a ball hawk. He's dominant, and he just knows football. He is there when he needs to be.
I mean, if I'm being completely honest, I gotta give credit's due. That defense played amazing for Baltimore this year. The reason why my team split 1-1 with him, but I mean, his stats are just they're not there, Lorenzino. They're just not there. He had 74 tackles, which is pretty good for a safety. You shouldn't have that many tackles anyway, because as a safety, your job is to just get the wide receivers, and the quarterback and the linebackers should get the running backs. That's just how it is. But he only had one interception for a safety. I feel like that's a little bit too low. But he was a big reason why that secondary was really good for Baltimore. And there was so many times where I thought, this team can go all the way. This team can go all the way because no one knew what to do against Lamar Jackson. That defense was playing great. The wide receivers were a little shaky. They had the tight ends, though. And you thought Baltimore was going to make this push when they got into the playoffs. Everybody thought Lamar Jackson, this Baltimore Ravens team, is going to make a push. And I mean, let's face it, they didn't. They didn't. They fell apart. And we kind of all expected that because of, Lamar Jackson being the quarterback. But that defense, no matter what, they played phenomenal. They held that Chargers team. And Baltimore has a really good defense. And Tony Jefferson, was a very, very big part of that. I don't think that people expected him to have this good of a year to even make our top 100 list, but he did, and he played amazing. Hopefully the production's still there next season. We've seen it increase in production from 2017 to 2018, so that's good. That's what Baltimore wants to see. But I don't know if this will continue, because there's a lot of safeties in this NFL that can make that leap from being, outside that top 100 to that inside top 100, and there's a lot of young safeties coming up as well. So watch out for them. But Tony Jefferson, 98 on this list. Now, if we're talking about why the New England Patriots, made the Super Bowl, you always have to think about that offense, how electric this offense is. And this is where number 97, the guy who plays center for this Patriots team, David Andrews, is marked on this list. And when you talk about the offense, you always talk about, Gronk and Edelman and Chris Hogan, Tony Michel, Tom Brady. But when you talk about the offense, there's one guy that stands above the rest, and that is David Andrews. Possibly, could be the best center in the NFL next season, because, his game has just progressed so good. And when you talk about why they don't get pressure, you talk about how they just fill in these gaps. The New England Patriots just fill in some gaps because, whether it's Nate Solder or someone else gone, you got to fill in that gap. And David Andrews has done an amazing job. He's young. He is very athletic. And he brings a lot to the table when it comes to that offensive line. That's another reason why Tom Brady isn't as sacked as much. Yes, people say he gets the ball out as quicker than anybody else in the NFL. But David Andrews, I mean, if I have him as my center, I'm pretty good. He should have made the Pro Bowl this year, if we're being completely honest. But the reason why, again, they won the Super Bowl is because nobody got pressure on this man. And it proved it. David Andrews is the next big thing.
Yeah, I think that offensive linemen in New England don't get a lot of credit. All the credit goes to Tom Brady, and granted, he is one of the best players to ever play in the NFL, but, I mean, what the New England Patriots offensive line does, week in, week out, it just does not get enough credit, and David Andrews is a big reason as to why New England made that run. I mean, offensive line is critical, especially in the postseason, and if you're gonna win a Super Bowl, well then, I mean, you just have to protect the quarterback. I mean, that's a key note of all of these teams that win Super Bowls. Their offensive line protected the quarterback. And especially being the guy who snaps the ball to Tom Brady, you're making adjustments on the line of scrimmage. You're calling out. You're doing all these different things while also trying to perfect that snap to make sure that Tom Brady's got a running start and he's ready to go once the ball's in his hands. I mean, it's a very tough position to play center, and David Andrews has done it has done it magnificently. I mean, coming from Georgia, they also have another Georgia guy there for New England. He's going to be teaching him, and I think David Andrews is just one of the less talked about offensive linemen, because we're going to have another offensive lineman, 2 more offensive linemen for the rest of this list, or from these 10 that we're going to talk about, and they're guys that are pretty well known. And David Andrews, you don't really hear that name with these 2 guys that we're going to talk about next.
Right.
But he's definitely a very good player. And at 26 years old, he's going to be that center for quite a bit. We know offensive linemen, they're pretty durable guys. They're big guys. They take a lot of hits, but they're durable. And if he can just stay off those lower body injuries, well, then he's going to be a really good player for a good amount of time. And we're going to move on to 96. And this is a player who we thought that the Browns had it easy coming into this draft, right? They had the number 1 pick. They had the number 4 pick. A lot of people were saying, let's not. They can't mess this up, right? But then they just go ballistic, really, and they surprise a lot of people with the number 1 pick in Baker Mayfield, and then with the 4th pick, because a lot of people thought it was going to be Bradley Chubb.
Right.
Instead, they go with who we have at 96 on the list, and that's Denzel Ward, and he played phenomenal this season, Reno. He was one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL this season. And Cleveland's defense had a lot of success this year. They did. And it was a big improvement. Now, they got a guy who we also have on this list a little bit later down. We're going to be talking about him a couple episodes, and Myles Garrett. But when you have a future star at cornerback in Denzel Ward down here, who had 3 interceptions on the season, I mean, he played great football coming from Ohio State, and he's going to be a solid building block for them down the line.
You talk about a guy that, people were really questioning what the Browns were going to do with the 4th overall pick. Are they going to take the guy that's going to be opposite of, Myles Garrett, who had an amazing year this season? But you know what do we need help with the most? Oh, wait, secondary. Oh, we're just going to take possibly the best corner in the draft. Now, people maybe at the time would disagree that Denzel Ward was the best corner coming into that draft. But, I mean, the way he played this season, it spoke character. He really stood out this season. And people are going to give credit to Myles Garrett, which they should because he had a great year. But that secondary was really good this season. People, cannot forget about the secondary. And Denzel Ward was a big piece of it. I mean, the guy only stands at 5'11", but what he can do at 5'11", which is amazing. I mean, you talked about the 3 interceptions. He also had 53 total tackles. I mean, he's probably going to get less targeted next season because of the season he had this year. But boy, oh boy, the man was on a mission. He wanted to prove people wrong, and he wanted to prove that, they drafted me at 4 for a reason, and this was the reason. And for a guy like Denzel Ward, who we saw in college that he had just so much of that play rec. He had great man coverage. He can do it all. And you know what? It stood out because he proved it last season. And Cleveland has himself not only a great defensive line going down and a guy, I basically can say his name, Joe Schober, who's not making this list. But, I mean, when you talk about the secondary, though, not only do you have guys like my boy Jabril Peppers in the secondary, but you also have Denzel Ward, which is going to be an amazing secondary to come. And just for the record, I thought he shouldn't have gotten number 4 at all. People thought, this guy's not going to go. But, I watched, hey, rookie, welcome to the NFL, and Bradley Chubb was even shocked. So, I mean, anything could happen in the NFL, and it sure did. Lawrence, we're going to move on to number 95, and we're going to talk about the guy that he made the top 100 last year for the NFL Network. He did make the top 100. The guy that was also drafted by the Green Bay Packers. And yes, I'm talking about the best defensive player on the Buffalo Bills, and that is Micah Hyde, the safety. 58 total tackles, 2 interceptions. This guy is basically the whole defense for the Bills. Tre'Davious White had another great year, of course, but Micah Hyde's the guy. That secondary is so much better with him on the field. And you have to admit, when he moved from Green Bay to Buffalo, that transition was so good for him that, he became a better player because of it. Green Bay, for some reason, whenever it comes to the Packers and they trade away players, they just happen to become superstars. It just happens like that. But you know what? Kudos to the Bills. They went out there, they got Micah Hyde, and he's just really balled out since he he's been in Buffalo last year. He had 82 tackles, he had 5 picks, another dominant season last year. This year the production did went down, but when we're talking about that one bright spot for the Buffalo Bills, it was Micah Hyde, and it showed this year because the Bills were so good on defense, especially in that secondary. And even though they only won a couple of games this season because they had that rookie quarterback, that defense didn't give up that many points, especially that secondary. You can probably say the D-line didn't get that much pressure, and your linebackers didn't do well. But when it came to the secondary, it was pretty much locked down. And it credits to not only Tre'Davious White but Micah Hyde. And I just can't wait to see what happens next year because I think he's going to have a better year than he did this year, which will increase his number higher. I remember putting him into the Fan Weekly's Top 100 last year that I wrote. So not surprised that he makes it this year because he is just a one-man wrecking crew in that secondary.
Yeah, that Buffalo Bills defense played surprisingly well, considering how bad that team was, how poorly they played. Micah Hyde's there in the secondary. Guess who has the best passing defense in the NFL this past year? It was the Buffalo Bills. They only allowed 179.2 yards through the air. And the reason is that because you have a guy like Micah Hyde back there. Tre'Davious White's really good as well. Their pass rush is decent. But, I mean, the stats don't lie. 179.2 yards per game. That's what they allowed. It's the best in the NFL. And the guy had, how many interceptions did he have? He had 2 interceptions on the year, 58 tackles. Like what you said, you don't really want your safeties getting a lot of tackles because that kind of shows that your linebackers and the guys up front aren't doing the job as well. But he had 2 interceptions, 58 tackles. He's playing really well, and it seems like age is not really getting to him. And Green Bay lets go of another one. They let go of the safeties, like what you said. I mean, it was Micah Hyde, Clinton Dix, Morgan Burnett. They let go as well. And you keep doing that, you keep making stars in other teams. Micah Hyde is definitely playing good for Buffalo, and they're going to have some good players down the line, especially on the defense. They got Tremaine Edmonds, and he's going to be a good player too. He had quietly had a good year, not enough to crack a top 100 list, but he is going to be another building block for them down the line. Reno talked about offensive linemen and David Andrews, who went 97 on this list. But another offensive lineman who gets a lot of attention, really. I mean, when we talk about this team, and this was a team that made the Super Bowl, Reno, he is always there in the conversation. When you hear Jared Goff talk, he always gives a lot of credit to this guy, and he's one of the best left tackles in the game, despite how old he is, and that's Andrew Whitworth.
I just gotta give a round of applause for Andrew Whitworth because I seen Whitworth since he was in Cincinnati. I'm like, just get out of there, and he did. He went to L.A. and it really helped his career. Talk about one of the best left tackles in the league, and that is Andrew Whitworth. I mean, for the guy being that old, he still gets the job done. He gets the job done 100%. And when you talk about the holes that Todd Gurley had this season, the regular season, why he was so electric, another reason is because that line was good, and Andrew Whitworth is blocking the blind side. Jared Goff was, people still call him that system quarterback, but why he didn't get sacked that much on his blind side? Andrew Whitworth was there. So when you talk and you see a bunch of these players, I mean, I'm pretty sure everybody in that Rams locker room will say Andrew Whitworth is the most deserving guy of a Super Bowl because, for so many years he just had that ups and downs in Cincinnati. Like, okay, we're in the playoffs, we had a good record, and then they fell apart. Yet again, in the playoffs, had a good record, then they fell apart. And for me, seeing Andrew Whitworth finally win an NFC North title, I mean, not a North title, but an NFC championship title, it was really good. I was really shocked that, Whitworth was so happy. And then he made that one comment in the Super Bowl. Remember that comment where he's like, everyone's going to die anyways? But I thought it was really funny. But Andrew Whitworth's one hell of a guy. I'm pretty sure he's a great character in that locker room. And he deserves to make this top 100. Not many people recognize him, but Andrew Whitworth deserves to be in the top 100, especially considering that he was probably one of the best left tackles in the league.
Yeah, you said that, a lot of people call Jared Goff a system quarterback. He is a system quarterback. I mean, do you see that Super Bowl performance? I mean, obviously, when it's not working out, he's not playing very well, And a reason why he played so well is because Andrew Whitworth was protecting him. He was making sure he wasn't getting hit. Because that's the whole point about system quarterbacks, right? You got to make them comfortable. They got to work within the system, And in order for that to happen, you have to have a good running game. You have to have receivers that are going to make plays, and you have to have a very good offensive line to where you feel comfortable. And a reason why he was so good this year, Jared Goff was because Andrew Whitworth and that offensive line played out of their mind. And you and me debated on some other Rams players on that offensive line. They ended up not making the list for us, but we had 2 other Rams offensive linemen because that's how good that unit was this past season. You said it. Todd Gurley had a great season because of that. Jared Goff's stats were so juiced because he was protected and comfortable in the pocket. Same goes for that wide receivers. When the offensive line is working, then the whole offense is working. The whole system is working. And left tackle, that's the most important position I could potentially say that's the second most important position in all of football besides quarterback.
Kicker.
And sure. Maybe 5. I don't know. Okay. We're at 93 now, Reno. We only got 3 more. And it's Jordan Hicks, the linebacker from Philadelphia. And this whole team, really, they weren't as dominant as they were in 2017 when they won the championship. But, they were still making plays. That defense, carried the weight of this offense because, Carson Wentz came back, and you can tell that he just wasn't right from that injury. And a lot of people are going to credit Nick Foles with taking that team as far as they did. But this defense quietly had a good year, and Jordan Hicks was kind of in the middle of all of it. He had 91 total tackles this year. 5 of them were tackles for loss. He had a fumble recovery as well, and 5 passes defense. That's kind of impressive for a linebacker like him. And he played extremely well this year. This was another guy like how I talked about with Tony Jefferson. He was all over the field, and we saw him in the running game specifically. But he's a multi-talented linebacker for that team, and he's going to be with them for quite a bit longer. And I'm really excited to see a guy like Jordan Hicks.
First of all, Lawrence, I just want to say I would like a linebacker on this team because you say he's going to be here for quite long. I don't know if Philadelphia is going to have the money to re-sign him during this offseason. That's going to be questionable. I don't think they're going to get it done.
To interject there on that one, I think because of this whole Nick Foles situation going on right now, this is strategic. Obviously, we know that Philly can franchise tag Nick Foles. We know that they could do whatever they so please with him, but instead they're just letting him walk. Why is that? Because they want to try and sign a guy like Jordan Hicks. Now, again, I don't know if Jordan Hicks is going to sign. We know these guys. We know the amount of money that can be thrown around. But they can lock him up and letting Nick Foles just walk the way they're letting him. There's a reason for that. I think it's because of Jordan Hicks.
Remember, they have to sign 2 key guys, not just one. You talked about Jordan Hicks, who's their middle linebacker, but Brandon Graham too on their line. So they're gonna have to make decisions because they don't have that cap room anymore. They don't have that explosive cap room they had. But in my opinion, I'd take Jordan Hicks, the linebacker out of Texas. I remember watching him come out. I knew it was going to be really good. But, people forget last season he went down early for the Eagles. He wasn't a part of that championship run. And this year he had something to prove. You talked about that 91 tackles. Talked about what kind of plays he made. And he's just a guy that I would want on my team. First of all, my team needs a linebacker. But, this guy can ball. He can ball. He's proven it before. He can ball. And here's a guy. Well, here's a guy. But this guy can go out there and make plays. And we saw it 2 years ago when he was really, really good. And last year was his down year. But this year he came back. And for a team that's looking for a linebacker, people are gonna say take Anthony Barr, take someone else. But Jordan Hicks is the guy that I would take because he's the guy you talked about. He moves around the field a lot. He can guard probably your best tight end, so he can go. He has that speed to go with him. But if anybody needs a linebacker, this is the guy you go get. I don't know if Philadelphia is actually going to let that happen. I hope they do because then my team can go out there and get him. But who knows? Who knows? It's just a matter of time. But Jordan Hicks deserves to be in this top 100. He played really good in this quiet defense that you talked about. 93 is a really good spot for him. I think he will improve next season. But hopefully this defense will start carrying that load that Jordan Hicks has if he remains on this team. Lorenzino, we talked about 2 offensive linemen today, and we already talked about 1 left tackle. We're going to talk about another left tackle, and that is Trent Williams. I mean, I got nothing to say about Trent Williams only because he just dominates everything. He's been around for a while now. It hurts me to see that he's sometimes always injured, and it really pains for me to see it. But this year, he was healthy, Lorenzino. He was really healthy, and it proved a lot. He played. How many games did he play? So he got 13 games this season. So, he remained healthy. That, for some reason, Washington always has some kind of problems with their offensive line. And, Trent Williams was one of the guys that wasn't hurt. And he's just so consistent. He's just so consistent in the way he plays. And that's probably a reason why he's still in this top 100. You're talking about, left tackles being the best position and the most important position on offense besides quarterback. But then you talk about the best left tackles in the league. You think Whitworth, you think Tyron Smith from Dallas, and then you think of Trent Williams. Those guys can really play. And for a guy like Trent Williams who has his big hands that could wrap around you and just, push defensive ends left and right, people start to, double teaming him because he's just so big, and it helps the left guard and it'll help the quarterback. I mean, we saw that, no matter who's back there for Washington, if you have Trent Williams on one side, you don't have to worry about your blind side. You have to worry about your other sides. But, I mean, Trent Williams will always go down as one of the best left tackles in the game. I mean, he's played a while now, and he's always consistently making that top 100 list on the NFL Network. So, I mean, he didn't make it last year because he was hurt, but this year, I'm pretty sure he makes it. He made ours, and he deserves it. He really does deserve it. I just want to throw out this stat. He did run a 4.8 in his combine, but, I mean, it doesn't really show on the field. But he can still, his hands, though, are really massive, and that's what makes him one of the best linemen in the league.
Yeah, and the guy's been to 7 straight Pro Bowls, and he's dominant. And he's consistently not only making the Pro Bowl, but he's consistently on the NFL's top 100 list as well, the one voted by the players. So obviously, that when the players are voting you in, that they know what's up, And Trent Williams is a guy who has been the one, shining player there on the Washington Redskins. So let's go ahead and move on to our last player of this list. We're at 91. We're going to kick it off with 90 next week, and it's with a soon-to-be free agent. And there's a lot of questions on whether the defending Super Bowl champions are going to re-sign him, and that's Trey Flowers. And he had a coming-out party this season. He had 7.5 sacks with 57 tackles and 9 tackles for loss. Also, 5 forced fumbles. I mean, the guy, you look at the stats, they're there. He's going to demand a lot of money this offseason. It's going to be whether or not the Patriots are going to sign someone like that. I mean, their defense, New England's defense is not really well known. They don't really have a lot of dominant players on there. Trey Flowers is one of them. Are they going to be able to lock him up?
They're going to franchise tag him. That's what I think that's going to happen. I mean, they're trying to go get Antonio Brown from what I'm hearing. But, I mean, he was so dominant this year for that D-line. It was crazy. The defense didn't really have a good year for New England. We saw it. But there was just that one man making plays. Number 98 was all over the field. Who got the sack? It's Trey Flowers. Yet again, Trey Flowers just makes plays. And he's going to be one of the top free agents available this offseason unless New England signs him or they franchise tag him. But, I mean, this guy was just dominant. You talked about his 7 sacks and talked about his tackles. I mean, there was nothing this man couldn't do. He also had a lot of pass deflections, too, this season. He was just everywhere. It was a nightmare. It was a nightmare whoever was guarding him because he was that good. He's going to get that contract, Lawrence. He's going to get that contract. He's going to get paid. He probably won't get paid in New England. He'll probably get paid somewhere else. He's that good, and he's that young as well. So he can make plays left and right. He's got a lot left in the tank as well. And for a guy that has a bright future and has already proved to you that he can play and he can ball at a position that's, always, people draft that position because it's important. Pass rushers are super important in the NFL. And for Trey Flowers to have this great of a year, this is what he needed in order for him to get that big contract because he played out of his mind this year. And to end out this portion of this list at 91 is perfect because You got a guy who's about to hit free agency and a guy that really dominated the football field this last season. And if you're being completely honest, someone's going to offer him a lot of money that's not New England, and he's going to get paid some guaranteed amount. Really, really, really. It's going to be high. It's going to be like 40 mil guaranteed, or maybe 50 mil. I don't know. He played really well this season. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets a big contract, but he's just that good. And I believe that maybe after next season, he could be one of the best, ends in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, every year, this money that's being thrown to pass rushers, we're realizing how important these pass rushers are. And every year, that guaranteed money, those contracts for those pass rushers, they go up every single year. And this guy's going to get paid a lot of money. He's in the perfect time. This is perfect time for him to be a free agent. And like what you said, he's going to make a lot of money. And that's going to end this episode. That's going to end this 10. But just to give you a little taste of what we're going to have next week from 90 to 81, we're talking about a rookie running back, Reno. We're talking about some wide receiver controversy that we might not have agreed on. No. We're also going to talk about a member of the Chicago Bears' stacked defense. And I just mentioned pass rusher right now. We're going to talk about a pass rusher who's set to make a lot of money when his time comes around for free agency. That's going to be next week when we go from 90 to 81. And that's going to end this week on Fully Charged. Don't forget to check us out. We have a Twitter at Fully Charged Pod. That's at Fully Charged Pod on Twitter. And also go follow at The Fan Weekly. We'll be back next week from 90 to 81.
Actually, we won't be back next week. We have spring break. So
we do have spring break.
It'll be actually in 2 weeks we will be back.
Anticipation builds.
It does.
Anticipation builds even more. I want to
know who's in that illustrious bunch of 90 to 81. I'm really excited.
Yeah, well, make sure to go follow The Fan Weekly to be caught up. And if you want to read a little bit more about this 100 to 91, go to Fan Weekly and check out an article that we're going to put up very soon. So that's at Fully Charged Pod on Twitter, at The Fan Weekly. I'm Lorenzo Estrada.
I am Reno Del Toro.
And that was Fully Charged. Have a good one, everybody.